Hello gamers, today is July the 12th, 2023, and I wonder if you can guess which game I'm playing today. Yes, that's right, it's Normandy 44 by GMT Games. This particular one I picked up brand new, and I've punched out all the counters and I've set up the game. And the one thing I will say is it took a while. Uh, this is a game in a bit more in the. I mean, it's got lots of innovation and everything. It looks like a really interesting game to play. I'm glad to have got started. But in the classic style, it's a game with a lot of pieces that have very specific starting locations and a very specific reinforcement schedule, that sort of thing. So it does take a while to set up the counters. I don't know if I did it particularly slowly, but the counters, I mean, it was actually punching them from the boards, of course. It was brand new, so they were sorted pretty pristinely, and it took me several hours. I think it probably took me about 3 hours, well, to punch them and to set them up. But I could easily see how setting up this game would probably take me at least an hour and a half or more. But it's all done, and I've jumped in, and let's take a look at the situation here in Normandy. And yes, this is a paper map. It's not a board, and it has not too much, but it does have a little bit of a sheen on it. And I don't presently have any kind of perspex or anything like that to lay over the top of it. I'm definitely going to look into that. Probably won't do this again where I'm playing a paper game that doesn't have perspex on top of it. Yeah, everything's set up, and sharp-eyed observers will probably notice that I've already played the invasion turn, which is the exception, excuse me, to the rest of the game. Right before turn one, we have an invasion turn, and one moment. Yes, we have an invasion turn on which we sort out the scattering and any losses to the airborne units who have arrived. And then we do the invasion combat itself, which is not normal combat. We do that at all the invasion beaches, and I've done that. And I'll go through just a few things of interest. Over here we can see we've got the remaining units for the Allies, at start. There's no German sheet, that's all been placed on the board. Then we have the German reinforcements over here, and we have the Allied reinforcements over here, so there are plenty of them. So yes, you do need some space with this because you've got cards to lay out. You need room for those as well. Let's see, the other thing that might alarm some people is these strange looking counters that I've got on top of the counters that came with the game. I've used those to be a mental aid to myself to indicate the units that have special movement restrictions on turn one. So that's most but not all of the Ost units have been so marked. So you will see those like this unit here, for example, that unit, that unit, that unit. And then also all the units of the, what is it, 21st? Let's have a look. I think it's 21st Panzer. Yeah, there we go, 21st Panzer. All the units of 21st Panzer have a restriction in that they only have 3 movement factors on turn one. Presumably represents them getting off to a slow start or something of that nature. Yeah, that's what all those curious looking counters have been used for, just as a mental aid for me. So let's see, how did the Allies do? Well, as we can see, the airborne, every time they lose a step in this particular phase, this one odd invasion phase, they get given a replacement point, which they'll be able to use to get their forces back. I haven't read all the rules yet, but trying to do what I can. So as we can see, because this one for the Commonwealth is up to 3, we know they lost 3 steps, and we know that the American forces lost 4 steps. If we see a yellow marker underneath them, we know that they're scattered. So we can see these chaps here are in absolutely pristine condition. They didn't get scattered, didn't lose any steps. And then we have these 4 units here, which all lost a step and got scattered. Then if we look at the British airborne forces, or I'll just use the term Commonwealth, although in this particular case it is British by the look of it. So down here, let's see, yeah, everybody, they lost 3 steps, so everybody lost a step and everybody's scattered. Okay, so what's going on down there? And then in the invasion forces itself, at least we didn't have any terribly bloody situation occur at Omaha Beach. I'm thinking that in most cases, they eliminated the enemy and they lost a step themselves. Okay, we can say that the DD tanks did very well, in the sense that 1, 2, and 3, in all 3 locations there for the American forces, the tanks have made it ashore completely unscathed. Then down in the Commonwealth sector, let's see what we've got. We've got 2 tank units unscathed, 1, 2, 3 tank units that lost a substantial part of their strength, DD tanks. Then also we did have some advances down here, in the sense that they not only got ashore but pressed on. So we had the forces here landing at Gig Gold, pressed on to Arromanches, and oh yes, heaven help me with my French pronunciation. I make no claim to being able to speak French, but I'm trying to do the best I can with the place names. Let's see, then down here at Juneau, forces that came on at Mike, they got a particularly good result and were able to press on to this hex here, which I don't know if it has any kind of name. Let's have a look. No, it's just out there in the countryside, more or less. Okay, and yeah, so that's what's happened. That's what's happened so far. Then on the invasion turn, so the next turn up will be a normal, a full turn in terms of most things, I suppose, for the Germans, and then there will be the Allied first turn. In which case, as I understand things, I believe that's when the Allied forces, which are in follow-up over here, we see all the follow-up. I believe they're coming on the Allied first turn, and yeah, everything's been pretty straightforward so far. Let's see what else. Yes, and come to think of it, that's a reassuring sight, I suppose, for any Allied commander, showing that the Allies have knocked out 9 fortifications. So I don't know, in terms of the overall luck factor on the first, not the first turn, the turn before the first turn, so to speak. I get the feeling it looks like the Allies have done quite well, but they do have basically the airborne forces, which are sort of westernmost and most southerly and westernmost, southwesterly, as I say, because they've all lost a step, as we can see those 4 there. That might be a bit of a blow. The other good fortune they had, that's right, there was a special roll for that, 50-50, it could have gone each way, was the second, or rather the secondary force that came in here, which was the 5th Rangers, could have gone to, Pointe de Doc, or to Omaha, and they went there where they were originally intended. So I'm assuming that in the great scheme of things, that's probably a good thing. And there we are. So, all right, off to a good start. And, well, let's press on. And here we are, where we have reached the end of the German first turn. Remember, the very first section of the game was the Allied landing, which had its combat. This was, as it were, before turn one. Then we had the German first turn, which had lots of restrictions on it as well for the Germans. There was some combat, certainly. And then we've moved on to the Allied turn one, which is going to contain the follow-up troops who appear as reinforcements, so to speak, or covered by the reinforcement rules, except the Allies don't pay for them, as it were. They're coming as per the charts. And what I've done is I've actually placed the follow-up forces in the beach or in the landing boxes, as it were. So follow-up forces for Utah, for Omaha, for Gold, for Juno, and for Sword. And they will come on. The only reason for them not to come on is if there's just insufficient room for them to come on because of stacking limitations. They can delay their entry for as long as the Allied commander wishes. What I've done is I haven't yet reset the position of the counters, the orientation of the counters. I've got them oriented according to what just happened in the German turn. So the counters that are sort of at, what can we call that? Pointing at sort of, I don't know, 2 o'clock. Or as you might call it, what would that be? That would be to the northeast. Those are the German units that moved, and then those that were in combat are oriented, pointing. I've marked them as due east, purely for my own entertainment, as you can imagine. So as we can see, if we look about, we can see that plenty of German units rushed forward to the front. These chaps, bicycle units, for example, they went as far as they could, which was quite a long way because they were down here. And then the Germans spaced themselves out to try and form some sort of line of defense, and try to get as close to the beaches as possible to stop the Allies from penetrating inland. But they had very meager forces in some places, very meager. And again, we can see units up here that moved, including that HQ unit there, which moved just 1 hex, which allowed it then to call in artillery, which it did onto this hex here, which caused the paratroopers that were there to retreat to this hex here. And there were no heavy losses. The American paratroopers lost 1 step. So that got replaced by a cadre unit. There's a cadre unit underneath that stack there. And then the British paratroopers also lost 1 step. So that meant we ended up with this cadre unit here. Germans also lost. I'm not sure, they didn't lose anything up there, but down here they had 2 attacks, attack from here and an attack from here, and both of those lost a step. And then apart from that, the German commander, sort of looking all along the line, found it very difficult to find locations where it was worth the Germans attacking, because if they had, the odds were massively against them. They would have just lost, almost certainly lost a step for no particular gain. And even given that it's sort of like, we must do everything we can to drive them back into the sea, there was not much of that going on. One thing to keep in mind that's easily missed is the whole thing about, of course, we've got the MAF, the main attack force, when we have an attack going on, and we want that to come from forces in the same division, and that way the forces are not penalized in any way. But you need to keep in mind that you can also form a Kampfgruppe or a battle group if you've got only 6 combat points or less. So if you can kind of scratch together 6 points, then there's no halving there, and then any other forces that are also involved would then be halved. So don't give up on the attack just because you haven't got everybody in the same division. You can form battle groups. You can form Kampfgruppe. Okay. And right, what else happened? Let's see, another sort of accounting. The one thing that did happen was it was determined that that one particular German unit there is indeed out of supply because it cannot trace supply across a Zoc-Bond hex side or through a Zoc-Bond hex. And of course, these chaps, because they're not scattered, they do have a zone of control. So they do have a Zoc-Bond, which goes to the sea along that hex side. And as we can see, it's beyond that, they are surrounded by enemy. So they don't have any supply. So they're out of supply. And if they remain in that situation, then one more turn, that will flip over to a red marker. And then they run the danger of being isolated and that sort of thing. Right. So now the next thing that would happen would be there are things that don't happen to the Allies on the Allied first turn. They don't do the normal replacement procedure, and they don't do the normal reinforcement procedure on turn one. But they do the follow-up wave. So that's all those forces come on as if they were reinforcements. And basically what's going to happen is the Allied commander is going to have to take forces on the beaches, move them inland so as to, well, get on with the business of winning the war. Obviously, there is a war on, but also in doing that, that will make space for the second wave to be able to arrive onto the beach. The second wave coming onto the beach is going to follow the reinforcements procedure in that it can only use tactical move, which is to say 1 or 2 hexes, and the first hex that they land on counts as the first hex. So basically they'll either be able to go to the beach or go 1 hex further if they can. And that's what will be happening next. So it's all very interesting. The mechanics of this game are very much unlike what I'm used to playing with, Avalon Hill Classics. And of course, having just finished playing No Retreat, they're very much unlike No Retreat as well. So although it's hexes and, combat results table and zones of control, those are familiar terms. But there are a lot of things going on in this game that are not familiar. So I'm doing my best, and I think probably what I'm going to do is unlike what I did with No Retreat when I covered that game, playing it for the first time. I think what I'm going to do in this one is I am not going to do individual combats, because if we did, I'm actually rolling the dice on camera, because if I did that, it would take a very, very long time. So I've done the combats, as I've said, and I think what I'll probably do is at the end of each turn, perhaps I'll summarize at the end of each player turn, as opposed to game turn. Maybe I'll summarize what happened and where, and we'll go from there. But at the moment, yes, it's all very interesting. A lot of rules to keep in my head, I have to say, because it is a very new system. Never played this series of games before, but I am enjoying it. And as usual, I say, here's to it. And here we are at the complete end of turn 1. So we've just finished all of the Allies procedures. And it's been very interesting. There's been a lot going on. And the thing, of course, for the Allies to do was to get their follow-up waves ashore. and that was possible at all the beaches except Omaha, where the basically this stack and this stack were on the beach, and they had no way of moving forward. So in the movement phase of the Allied turn, it was not possible to bring on the follow-up troops here. So that's important because it means that it looks like they're going to probably come on next turn, but that was important at the end of this turn when we check for supply, because the Omaha beach is not open, which is to say, having a functioning or having an engineer unit in place, or having a Mulberry, I think it is. But anyway, clearly they don't have that. So they were able actually to get their supply from elsewhere. But anyway, moving on. So yeah, the follow-up waves arrived at all the other beaches. The units moved off the beach first, and then just continuing on in movement, the reinforcements moved on. Of course, when reinforcements do arrive, they can move 2 hexes, and they're halved in combat, and they're marked with a regroup marker and all this sort of thing. So I don't think there was very much instances, perhaps more down in the Commonwealth sector, there were no instances in the American sector of follow-up forces getting involved in combat. So for example, these are all follow-up forces here. These forces were in this region here. They attacked here. I think they destroyed an Ost unit, and they advanced. There were 3 in the stack. 2 of them advanced into Saint-Mère-Église, and then these chaps stayed behind. Otherwise, they would have overstacked there. So, and then there was a combat here, and I believe both sides lost a step. That's all that happened there. The follow-up units came on and moved down into this position here. We can see now that at the end of the turn, as is the case at the end of any turn, I suppose, it looks like you remove most of the markers. So certainly the scattered markers came off, and also the disrupted marker that was on one of these units here because it had retreated. They have all come off now. So that means that when the units the paratroopers are not scattered, when they're scattered, they cannot move and they cannot attack. They defend just fine, but now those are gone, so they can indeed move and attack. So that's what happened there. So, small improvements made up here. Big difference made here at Omaha, and now we can see that the 2 stacks that were here, they did well, and they pushed out. They also, at least, I'm not sure if it was used there, but naval support was used. That's possible on the first turn, so it's not excluded from the first turn. Air support, for example, is that only becomes available in the second turn. Anyway, so they pushed forward, and we can see that. Let's see, I'm just wondering if I need to correct a mistake. Just one second. There we go, easily fixed. I had neglected to put a disrupted marker on that stack there, which had retreated. So if you retreat, you're disrupted. So these chaps moved to here, causing these chaps to retreat. They didn't keep their sword in their back because they wanted to stop there so as to. They didn't like the look. I didn't like the look of the situation if they moved that far forward. Looked a bit sort of iffy down here, because I had thought about, for example, a construction where if they did remarkably well, that unit advanced to here, paying the price for leaving a Zoc and then stopping there. And then if they were there, they moved to here and then they attack them. And if they had savoured of a miracle and defeated them, there was a possibility, because you can advance after combat in any direction, that they would have been able to advance from here to here, which I didn't want any possibility of that happening. Anyway, so these chaps stopped at this point. So we have, let's see, we've got a Zoc bond here. And then over here, we've got the more conventional Zoc convention of, well, there's Zocs here and there's Zocs. There's no Zoc bond, but, there are Zocs. And for the uninitiated, a ZOC, a ZOC or ZOC, is a zone of control. Okay, having established that, moving on. And then these chaps attacked from Colville-sur-Mer, and they came on this way, pushed these chaps back to here. Okay. Some desperate defenses were attempted, I believe, in the spirit of the, push them back into the sea, but didn't get very far with that, I'm afraid, the German defenders. Then moving down to Gold, Juno, and Sword, we can see that we had chaps, excuse me, we had chaps which were able to advance down in this direction, pushing these chaps back. They retreated probably rather sensibly to Bayeux because they want to hang on to that, keep the Allies out of that. Then down in this direction here, well, let's see, looks like we had these chaps probably pushed back to that situation there and advanced forward here. And then I think those forces there were, actually I'm not sure what his movements were, but I'm pretty sure, because I've taken the markers off now, I'm pretty sure, well, their follow-up, I'm pretty sure they are. So they're follow-up units that weren't actually in any combat. They just moved to that position. There was a big rumpus down here where we had these chaps were right here in this bend of the river. So they had the river in their favor against 1, 2, 3 stacks that were arranged around them like this. And when you're attacking across a minor river, you're halved. So that's a pretty big one. But they did manage to defeat them. They called in naval support. And so the defenders were pushed back to here, okay, and they advanced forward. Good strength pressing forward there. And also they've got ZOC Bond there, line of units. Okay, there's a ZOC Bond there, for example, and units here. So yeah, good sort of a perimeter. I might even call it a beachhead there. And let's see, here there was a sort of forlorn hope going on here. These chaps did actually attack them at 1 to 2. The idea was that the spirit of the thing was, just blast away and try and make some progress and damn the torpedoes, sort of a thing. And they suffered a step loss in consequence. That's what happened to them, and didn't even scratch the paint on these Panzer Grenadiers down here. And I think we can see we also had follow-up there, arriving at Ouistreham. And one unit had to stay behind because it wouldn't fit in there. And then, of course, we've got these chaps down here who were scattered and weren't allowed to attack, so they didn't do anything at all. And, well, I suppose they probably held their ground with a plucky sort of a plucky sort of way, the way paras do, And yes, I don't know that there was anything else that was particularly important to announce. Yeah, then after all that, removed all the markers. And as we can see, I'm not quite sure when these flip over. We've got the naval markers. They'll flip over at some point. And then we go into turn 2, where a lot of... it's a lot more like sort of normal in turn 2. So I think both sides they'll be doing reinforcements, they'll be using replacements, and all that sort of thing. And well, I think that's about a wrap for this session. And it's all very good, all very interesting. The one thing I would say was, just a second. Yeah, the one thing I would say was that when when the Allied commander had these 3 stacks these 3 stacks here, 1, 2, 3. They were 1, 2, 3 up here, and they attacked these chaps here who were behind the river. When I was going through them and establishing which one, what division should be the main attacking force, and then which units could be attached to it, and then which units were going to be at half strength. That I did think, I mean, it is unusual. There were, what have we got? I think there are something like 8 counters in 3 stacks. And they do come from a lot of different organizations. And so that was pretty darn fiddly. And I thought that savored of almost like, you want to get out a piece of paper or a calculator to start sort of keeping track of what you're computing for the combat. And I'm glad. I'm hoping that over the course of the campaign or the engagement, that we're not going to see too much of that, because it was a little, I have to say, tiresome. But most of the other ones, obviously it's in your interest to try and keep divisional forces together. And there we go. So that was my only sort of, I didn't quite care for that part. But I'm sure it's all jolly realistic, and I say here's to it. So apart from that, yes, as I mentioned, I say here's to it.